So many choices. We'll start with this guy here. Not bad. I kind of like a smaller one here for this guy. Also not bad. Здравствуйте, comrade! Today we're going to talk about the difference between revolvers and semi-automatics. So let's start with the revolver. First of all, let's make sure that this is clear. Looks like I've shot all 6. Start off right away with the disadvantage of revolvers. Don't get me wrong, I'm a revolver guy. I love revolvers. Revolvers are typically limited to 6 cartridges. So if you're going to carry one, you got 6 shots. You can also bring reloads. We'll get into that in a second. Most people wouldn't carry something like this. This is big, heavy, cumbersome. This is more for your home defense option, in my opinion. This over here is more something like you would tend to carry. Unfortunately, 5 shots. Maybe you don't put as much emphasis on how many bullets you carry. Some people do, some people don't. It's up to you. Let's get into this here. A revolver is a great choice for concealed carry or home defense. A revolver has a phrase about it which is 6 for sure, i.e. you have 6 shots that'll never fail. Benefit with a revolver is that in general, they are more reliable than semi-automatics. Now some people will be up in arms about that statement. We'll get into that in just a second. Again, gun is clear. Now, if I'm shooting here and I pull the trigger and I get a click and I need to shoot again, what do? I pull the trigger again and it goes to the next one. See how that wheel rotates every time? That's what people mean when they say that revolvers can't jam. Now a revolver can jam up, technically, yes, there is all sorts of little things going on underneath here. Revolvers have a lot of longevity though, because they don't rely on springs unlike their semi-automatic brethren over there. You can put it in storage for say 50 years, never oil it, it'll still shoot when you need it to, most of the time. Now, revolvers come in different configurations. This one here is a Smith & Wesson K-frame. It's a 4-inch barrel. I've carried this before. I wouldn't recommend carrying it. It's a bit heavy, a bit bulky. That barrel length is kind of an issue for me. Now you may be different. You may be able to carry one of these, no problem. Again, I carried it, just not comfortably. Most people, when they carry a revolver, are looking at something like this. This is your Smith & Wesson J-frame. This is specifically a model 36. And I carried one of these for a while too. And I can tell you right now that these are incredibly comfortable for carry. Again, this gun is clear. As you can see here, the cylinder only has 5 shots. So 1 less. You pay for having such a small revolver. The great thing about revolvers is that they're typically chambered in stronger cartridges than semi-autos. Now for some of you that will make a difference because you want a big strong cartridge. For others of you, you're going to say that shot placement is the most important thing. I think that there's a balance to be made between each one. Again, though, I wouldn't feel undergunned with any of these. Rule number 1 of gunfighting is have a gun. So let's get into shooting a revolver. Now the way I was taught, you have 2 different ways to hold the firearm with a revolver versus a semi-auto. With a revolver, you take your strong hand here. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Strong hand here. Bring your left hand up. Sorry for you lefties whose left hand is strongest. Come over. That allows you to access the single action. This is what I was taught as far as how to hold a revolver. Hold, aim, pull the trigger, it goes bang, yada yada. Some people like to bob the hammers on their revolvers. I can't do that to mine. I personally, I don't like the way it looks. I don't like what I would consider to be facing a revolver. I tend to be more of a purist because I'm a military surplus guy. Some people say that you will snag when you draw. If you're drawing from concealment with a revolver that has a hammer that's not bobbed or cut off, you'll draw, it'll snag up in your clothes, you'll struggle with it. That's never happened to me. Granted, I've never had to draw my firearm under a stressful situation, so I'm probably not the best authority on that. From the research I've done online, though, some people have had snags, most people have not. Now, one more thing about a revolver. This is just more of a safety thing. When you're shooting a revolver, you always keep your hands behind this cylinder gap. You see here how there's a little tiny bit of a gap here between the barrel and the cylinder. It's so small you might not even be able to see it on the camera. But rest assured there is a gap there. Now when a cartridge discharges inside of a gun, there's a tremendous amount of gas and pressure that comes out and fires that bullet. On a revolver, it comes out the side too. So if you were to have your finger up here when you pulled that trigger, you can say goodbye to your finger. Most of the time though, as I've shown you here, when you're firing, your hand is going to be well behind the cylinder, so it's not really that big of an issue. Just make sure you don't ever have your finger up there, or your hand, or your favorite toy, or anything. So, revolvers are great. They don't have the capacity. Some people say you want as many bullets as you can. There's the quote that anyone who was ever in a gunfight never says, "I wish I had less ammunition," which is probably true. Now, revolvers can be loaded with speed clips, or moon clips, speed loaders, or speed strips. Now, I don't have any of those here on the table because I'm an unprepared guy. The way a speed loader would work is it's shaped just like the cylinder. You load the cartridges into it, line it up, push it in or twist, take it out, and you got 6 already in there, because a revolver takes a long time to load if you load it like this, one at a time. Very slow. Enjoyable. I enjoy loading them like this, but I wouldn't enjoy loading them like this if I were in a stressful situation. Slow to load. And now a speed strip is just a strip that has all the cartridges that you have on it, and you just throw them in there one at a time off of the strip. Line them up. You can typically do 2 or 3 at a time. Line them up, take the strip down, do the other side. What this gets at is that there are easier ways to reload a revolver than manually thumbing them in. And you know, since we have a full cylinder, we might as well shoot. Let's do some single action shooting. Again, eject your cylinder, push down on your spring, they fall out. I always thought that was neat. Okay, now then. I don't know if I have much else to say on revolvers. They tend to be heavier, I guess. For me, I'm a guy who likes the weight. I'm not a big fan of your lightweight guns. I like the heft. Most people would say that I'm crazy because of that. You know, I think that's really all there is pretty much to revolvers. I'm sure I'll think of something once we go over to the semi-automatics, but let's go ahead and move on over to the semi-automatics. These guns are much more popular today. Let's get this in here before it decides it wants to get in the way of everything. Now these are military surplus guns. As I've said, I'm a military surplus guy. As you can see, this is empty. Let's make sure this is empty. Yep, completely empty, no mag in it. So I'm saying to put my hand right there. Anyway, so these are double single action guns, and that's something I'll get into in a future video. Your semi-automatics have some advantages and some disadvantages, so let's just jump right into that. Your first advantage of a semi-automatic is capacity. This gun here holds 12 cartridges, 12 in the magazine, 1 in the pipe, for a total of 13. That's more than double my Smith & Wesson K-frame over here, which I love very much. Another thing is that it's easy to reload. So I'm going to load this. It holds 12. I've only got 10 in the mag. Cycle it, Let's take some shots. Now, before I shoot actually, let's look at the grip difference. Now, this is loaded, let's be careful. If I were to load this or hold this like a revolver, like so, some of you were screaming at me right now, and fire this, this slide's gonna go backward, right into my thumb, and it'll take a nice bite out of it. So don't hold it like that. Instead, strong hand like this, bring this thumb up underneath this thumb, right here. Don't ever teacup like this. If you teacup like this, the gun's gonna recoil to the left. It's gonna be harder to control. So let's just do this. Let's take some shots. When the gun is empty, most pistols, the slide will lock back, letting you know it's time to feed it. Now, how do you eject? Now, guns are different, or semi-automatics are different in how they load and function. This one here, you're gonna push on this button, the magazine slides right out. Now, if you had a fresh magazine, which this one's empty, all you do is load it in there, and it'd be ready to go. Anyway, another advantage or disadvantage, depending on what you're doing with it, is that you probably saw when I shot this, all the spent cartridges flung out, right? No need to manually eject whatsoever. A disadvantage, though, is that these guns can jam. Yes, revolvers can jam too, but let's talk about day-to-day here. Semi-autos are finicky with the types of ammunition that they use. With a revolver, I can load any kind of ammo I want, any brand, anything into it, and it'll fire because it's not reliant on springs. It's not reliant on this moving back and forth to eject and then load the new round into the magazine or into the chamber. With a semi-automatic, the type of ammo you use matters. If you load ammunition in there it doesn't like, you'll get a hang-up, which requires you to eject the mag, rack the slide, see what's wrong with it. Most people who carry this will practice failure drills. Rap, tap, bang is one. I'm not going to get into those here. That's beside the point of this video. Most of your semi-automatics will not jam. I've never had a single issue with either of these two guns here. I've never really had an issue with most of the semi-automatics I've ever shot. For the most part, they're pretty reliable. A revolver does, in the long run, have the edge though. And if you get a hang-up, if you get a click instead of a bang on a revolver, you just pull the trigger again and it rotates to a fresh cartridge. With this, you gotta see what's up. Now, capacity, speed, and ease of reloading have made semi-automatics the kings of concealed carry, of police agencies in the modern world since about the 90s. Before then, your revolver was king. And I'm sure those of you who are old enough to remember can remember all the police carrying these big K frames or even L frames on their hips. Unfortunately, the revolver is not nearly as popular, especially with the new generation of shooters. Now let's get into one more advantage here of the revolver real quick, since we're on semi-autos. With a revolver, you get a little bit more power. On average, the revolver chambers more powerful cartridges than semi-automatics. Not always true, most of the time. Also, an advantage of having a 357 revolver, which is what this is chambered for, is 357, is you can fire 38s, like I did, or you can fire 357s. Now this over here is just a 38 special gun. You cannot fire a 357 in there. Number one, it won't fit, and number two, even if it did fit, somehow when you shot it, your gun's going to go bye-bye. But with a 357, you have some interchangeability. You can shoot 38 special or 357. A lot of people will buy a 357 handgun and then load it with 38 special plus P, which is just a hot-rodded 38. I'm typically not a fan of that either. I know I'm an old traditionalist. I have an old soul. Anyway, so let's go ahead and load 3 357s here. Just thumbing it in. And 3 38 specials. Now, I gotta remember, different manufacturers' cylinders rotate in different directions. I believe that this one rotates to the left for Smith & Wesson, but don't quote me on that. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna mix these in. And trust me when I say that you'll be able to tell what the 38 special is and what the 357 is. So here we go. That was a 357. That was a 357. Now we're going to do some 38s. Can you tell the difference? Ultimately, it's preference as to whether you want 38 or 357. They'll both get the job done for concealed carry or home defense. I like the 38 special over the 357. I think that especially if you're carrying it in something as small as this. With this, you lose all the advantage of a 357 because the short barrel, you're just going to get a lot of flash, a lot of bang, and not a whole lot of extra power versus just a normal 38 in a small gun like this. Anyway, that's my addendum on revolvers. Let's move back to the semi-autos. Now then, this here has a heel release. Most of your American guns don't have this. This is a very European trait. Anyway, I think that's about all the pros and cons. So let's come up to a determination real quick. Should you carry a revolver or should you carry a semi-auto? Why not both? In all seriousness, it's really what you prefer. I carried a revolver for years. I've carried a semi-auto for years. They're both great. I've never felt undergunned with either one. It ultimately depends on, do you want more ammunition or do you want something a little more old school? Do you want a lighter gun? Do you want a heavier gun? Do you want a bigger caliber? Do you want interchangeability with 357 or 38? Or do you want to stick with just one caliber? It's up to you. Oh, yeah. Something I forgot in the main video that's a pretty big consideration is that revolvers don't have safeties. Semi-autos do. For instance, on this one, if you cock the hammer back, by the way, still clear. If you cock the hammer back and lift up, there's your safety. Turn it off, pull the trigger. The revolver, also still clear, has no safety. The safety on a revolver is considered to be its heavy trigger. It takes a bit of effort to pull. Now this is a Smith & Wesson, so the trigger's pretty nice, but in general, your revolvers don't have safeties. Most of your semi-autos do. That's about it on that.